All right, welcome back. So in this video, we're now going to actually talk about the charging technique for charging your subconscious to you transcendentally control your chi. I'm being careful about saying charging your chi as in building your chi up. I think they're the same thing, but technically, I suppose they're technically different things. So specifically, I'm just telling you the technique to charge your subconscious to transcendentally control your chi. And like I said before, the technique is virtually the same as it was for charging your subconscious to use sensory type psychic abilities. So we'll pretty much just run through it. I don't even think it'll be that long. Like I said, it's mostly the same thing. So you would start off the same way. So you pick a target and you pick the manifestation intention. The target would be the subject of the manifestation intention. It is useful to differentiate between when the target's inside the body and when it's outside the body. I largely feel that if it's outside the body, then that is generally going to be something that is illegal, right? So I define what that is, or I alluded to the definition before. So in other words, you're doing something that's against the will of God, right? So if I charge my chi to try to use telekinesis or control something at a distance, probably that is something God doesn't want, that's outside his word, that makes it witchcraft and occultism. And you would feel your spiritual energy drop. Now, if it's inside the body, right, so that's an expression of chi that's going to be affected by your silver cord. So you have two connections, right, or two avenues with which your chi is going to be manifested according to or through, right? We talked about the silver cord connection, your chi will manifest in an indirect way. So if you're just focusing on random stuff, it's still going to affect the way chi manifests in your body. But for the transcendental connection, which is the supernatural one, you would use all these rules, which in that case, you would have to actually focus on your body. You can't focus on other things and still get the same chi control and manifestation. But I'll get into that. But just to say that with transcendental chi control, that's the one we're mainly focused on. But now, I'll get into it a little later, but when you're focusing on something inside your body, in this case, the one I'm going to use is healing. Just like before, so when we're talking about sensory type psychic abilities, I just literally picked some sense intention to talk to basically for just the discussion. In that case, I used the C sense intention, which basically translated into clairvoyance. So I'm going to do the same thing here with the heal manifestation intention. So we're going to talk about it charging your subconscious to control your chi. We're going to talk about doing that inside the body using the healing intention, just to pick one, right? So you'd be able to adapt the overall technique to really any manifestation intention, but I'm going to use that one. And that one, I've been able to successfully do while charging spiritual energy, so it doesn't feel evil, at least the last time I did it. I actually didn't have any responses from God saying it was wrong, so I don't know. I haven't really practiced this very much. So I would have to pray to God and ask about that, but just want to put that out there. You always check with God first if any of this is okay. All right, so to get into it, you would pick your manifestation intention. In this case, we're going to focus on the body, and manifestation intention is going to be healing. And just go over this first point. It says, focus on your body and hold the intention to heal it for about 5 to 10 seconds, and then stop for at least an hour before repeating. So very basic stuff. So we talked about just basically piggybacking off of the discussion for charging psychic energy, which this is also charging psychic energy, by the way. It's the same technique. We talked about how your body heavily dampens the psychic expression of your subconscious energy, right? So your subconscious instinct expresses itself in different types of actions, right? So we talked about motion, creativity, belief. The other one, right? So we talked about motion, creativity, belief, and altered perception, right? So altered perception, which can express itself as imagination or belief, right? And we talked about control. And so one of the ways it can express itself is also in the form of sensing. So we talked about that in the last chapter for psychic energy. But now for psychic energy in general, it can also express itself in terms of transcendental control of your chi, right? But to do that, you need psychic energy. And to do that, you have to, and once you have that, I should say, it activates the spirit. Now, your body heavily dampens psychic energy expression, whether that be in the form of sensing, your spirit sensing something, or your spirit controlling your chi in a transcendental way. Your body heavily dampens it more than any other transcendental mental ability. Right, and so you generally have to just pre-charge it, right? Because even with all of that dampening, you can still pre-charge it decently easily, right? Because during the pre-charge session, right, your negative memory doesn't build as easily. So as I said before, it's virtually an entropy dead zone. And even then, transient memory is still pretty powerful when it comes to psychic energy, but it's not powerful enough to really block you from charging. Right? And so if you try to skip right into the main charging technique with this, you're going to know that you can't really get very far. At least that's how it was for me, because negative memory builds up so insanely fast due to the subconscious entropy rate, right? So you want to really spend a lot of time in the pre-charging zone, right, when charging your subconscious to control your chi, which is the exact same rule we talked about last chapter and this is just a rule for psychic energy in general, right? So you want to do a lot of pre-charging. So the pre-charge, you would just hold the intention to heal your body, hold that for about 5 to 10 seconds, and then stop. Now, we talked about how transient memory lasts way longer for psychic energy, at least that's been my experience, and so you would wait about an hour, not necessarily like 10 minutes like you can for virtually every other transcendental mental ability. You wait about an hour, and you could wait longer, but at least an hour as a rough approximation, before repeating the process. So when you repeat the process, you would hold the intention to heal your body again for about 5 to 10 seconds and then stop. And then you would probably do it like a couple times throughout the day. Now, when you hold the intention to heal your body, just like before, like any pre-charge session we talked about, you're gonna feel like the emotion of healing, right? It has an emotional feeling attached to it, and you're gonna feel it. And when you hold your intention for 5 to 10 seconds, you're gonna feel the emotion of healing rising, right? And then it's gonna peak. And if you hold it for a longer period than that, you're gonna feel it start to drop. So with the pre-charge session, you wanna stop the session before it drops. So you wanna get right around the peak and then stop, right? You don't wanna think about healing again for that whole hour, otherwise your transient memory will build back up. So just don't think about it again for about an hour, and then when the hour mark hits, or when you want to do it again, then you finally think about your body and you think about healing again. Or you think about your body in that way, which is in the way of holding the command that it heal. And then you pretty much just keep repeating that, right? You keep repeating that over and over. You could do it for roughly a day or two, right? Well, I never did this really that much at all, but when I did it for about 2 days. There was only one time that I really used these techniques. Was it one? Yeah, I think it was just one. There's only one time I really intentionally used these techniques to try to see how far I could go with it. What happens when I keep charging? Because that's still a mystery to me to some degree. But I only did it one time with the healing intention. So I'll talk about that next video, actually. But yeah, that's pretty much my only experience with it. I just really did it one time with this. But yeah, so you want to just keep doing it, keep charging, and then it's going to keep building up. And I was thinking about talking about deep charging, because when you pre-charge enough, it starts to deep charge. We'll talk about that a little later. But I would do this for about 2 days, so it would start to deep charge a little bit, and then I would skip to the main charging phase. Now, to go over this point, to main charge, or for the main charging phase, you would hold the intention to heal while telling some highly affirmational story that charges your belief. And it occurs more powerfully when entering a state of full attention or doing a level 2 charge. So, like I said, basically the same principle as we talked about for last chapter for psychic energy, or for sensory type psychic abilities. So, when you're main charging, so you would hold the intention to heal your body for more than 10 seconds. So I usually would do it, at least when I was actually doing this, I think I did it for about maybe 20, maybe 30 or 40 seconds. I built myself up to about 40 seconds, because once you go past that pre-charging phase, negative memory builds up insanely fast, right? So you don't want your main charging sessions to be too long. Otherwise, you're just going to build up negative memory, and you're going to notice that your subconscious isn't as volatile toward this healing intention. It's not doing as much. right? Because there's too much negative memory and it's suppressing it from entering a transcendental state or excited state. So yeah, you want your main charging sessions to also be short, and but the volatility you build up over the 2 days from pre-charging will help you to still kind of make your subconscious memory more positive or to charge more energy while in these short sessions when you're pre-charging. And so now while you're holding an intention to heal, you would also tell and you can do that too when pre-charging, but you would just do it longer, but you would tell a highly affirmational story. So we talked about how the main charging technique always involves holding some intention and then telling some story. The story that works best for healing, with some kind of manifestation intention, would be affirmational stories. A story just you tell in your mind that convinces you and makes you believe like crazy. So you want the story to really target your belief or your transcendental belief. You want to believe that this is happening and that you're doing it. So in this case, you would tell a highly affirmational story that gets you to really believe that you're healing your body and that you can heal and that you have this power and that you're healthy and that you're so you could say certain things in the story, but it affirms the belief that you're healed or that you're healing. And yeah, you just keep telling some story like that. You would want the target, of course, or the subject to be your body. So in the story, you're constantly saying things. When I've done this, I would imagine myself in some environment for some reason I always felt the need to do the forest, right? And I also did it like in heaven, because I'll talk about that in a moment why I did that. But I would imagine myself in a forest or something that makes me feel a sense of peace, but also a sense of like rejuvenation. So I guess the forest kind of does that with the trees and stuff like that. And if you think about spring weather, things like that, I don't know. But I would do that, and I would just keep affirming to myself that I'm healing and that I'm healed. And I would just make up some random story in my mind around that concept, but the subject would always be my physical body, right? If I make it some other random subject, then my chi is not going to manifest the tension properly, right? Because now I'm trying to pick some other random target. It may not even be real, right? I'm trying to pick some other random target to heal it. I have to focus on my body and keep my attention on it, which I'm going to physically feel as well. That's another important thing. So like I said before, when you do this, you're going to feel it, and you're going to feel your spirit starting to activate, and that's because your psychic energy is charging. And what's going to happen is you're going to start to sense, psychically sense, so using your ESP, you're going to start to sense your own body, right? Which it's important because you're not using your physical senses, right? You can physically sense everything about your body, no problem, but you're going to notice that now you can psychically sense your own body, and it's like you're going to pick up information that's a little bit different from what you're picking up physically. I'll talk a little more about my experience with that in the next video, but that happened to me. I could sense different things in my body psychically. And that just happens when you use your chi. You have to psychically sense it in order to use your chi on it. From my experience, that seems to be the rule. Excuse me. So yeah, you would just tell a highly affirmational story, and you want to tell it in a way where it continually hammers the belief that you're healing. And what's going to happen, I should mention, not that it's super important, whenever I've done this healing thing, I think I mentioned it before, but I'll say it again, I see like a very orangish yellow color, right? I don't know why, and I keep thinking of the sun. I don't know why that happens. It's like the sun has something to do with healing. It's not just like the color of the sun. I think of the actual sun, right? I don't know why. I feel this urge, this intuitional sort of just compulsion to focus on the sun when I'm healing. I don't know where that comes from or why that is. But that seems to be a color associated with the subconscious form of healing. And so yeah, I just thought I'd mention that. But yeah, when you charge it, when you keep charging, you're going to feel it more and more. And what's going to end up happening is when you enter a transcendental state, which I didn't even really mention that yet. But yeah, while you're doing this, you're holding your attention and you enter a transcendental state, you're going to feel, just like emotions, right? When you enter a transcendental state, you're going to start performing certain actions out of pure instinct, right? So that's how your subconscious works. When you enter a transcendental state, you just produce an emotion. You don't think that much about it on a conscious level. You just do it, right? That's how all subconscious actions work. That's how subconscious instinct operates. A very just do it feel to it. And in this case, when you enter a transcendental state, with these intentions, you quantize your subconscious properly such that when you enter a transcendental state, you're going to just heal, right? You're going to just use your chi to heal, right? Now, if I say it that way, it might seem like, well, how do I just use my chi to heal? You just do it, right? That's the best way I can explain it. It'd be like if I tried to tell you how to produce an emotion, right? You just do it. When the conditions in the environment are set up in a certain way, you find that you just do it, right? You just produce emotion, right? You just feel a certain emotion. And that's kind of it, right? There's no more conscious effort needed, right? Once the environment's set up properly, you just do it. That's how controlling your chi is. This is what happened to me. So when you do this properly, when you do all this, it's going to quantize your subconscious to heal. And then you're going to notice when you enter a transcendental state while telling a story, at a level of instinct, you just heal your body with your chi. You just do it, right? And you're going to feel it. And it feels kind of nice, right? I'll talk a little more about it in the next video. Yeah, the next video. But it feels pretty nice. But you're going to notice that you're just healing your body, just very simply. And that's what I was saying before about your subconscious instinct has the ability to. Oh, I should mention that it's going to feel like transcendental control. Like you're using a subconscious action of motion in some way. It's going to feel like you're moving something as you're healing your body. It's not going to feel like just like you're emotionally feeling something or you're believing something or imagining something. Those will come along too, don't get me wrong. But the real main action that seems to be doing the work is going to feel like you're moving something. And that's what's really causing things to happen. So it's an expression of transcendental. Controlling your chi is a form of transcendental control that comes from your spirit, which you need psychic energy for. Now, for this next part, it says it occurs more powerfully when entering a state of full attention, which is true of any charge, right? So when you're doing this, you can enter a state of full attention, which the techniques we talked about, just by being more patient. Now, one thing I should mention is I haven't really practiced this enough to kind of divide it into or talk too much about the subconscious burst action. So we talked about how the burst action could be more calm or excited. Based on my memory, I would say this probably leans more toward an excitement burst, when you just burst this expression of healing in your body. So I don't think I ever really did this as a calm burst, but I would have to research it, but I don't really care about this stuff like that. So I don't want to do anything like this, especially without permission and approval from God. And I'm not really that interested in this stuff anyway, so I haven't asked him about it. I asked him about psychic abilities in general because I felt like he was calling me to use them. I think he might even want me to do this, but I would have to ask him. I've just been kind of too busy to focus on it right now. So yeah, I would just say always focus on God and get permission from Him before doing any of this stuff. But yeah, if you enter a state of full attention, you can do it using the patience technique, or you can do it using desire. You can also just tell the story in a way that makes it highly interesting to you. When something's very interesting, your subconscious, if we were to say it's transcendentally interesting, right? Normal interest would just be your negative mind choosing to be interested in something. But transcendental interest would be your subconscious mind. At the level of instinct, you're focused on something. And when that happens, your subconscious tends to compel you to draw more of your attention towards something. So it's easier, even though attention is still relegated to the conscious mind, it's easier for your conscious mind to put all of its attention on something if your subconscious is helping you. And it helps you by altering your perception through a compulsion. So the more interested if you make your story super interesting, just make it really interesting and highly, tell it in a way where you're highly interested in the story, your subconscious will become transcendentally more interested, and you'll be transcendentally interested, and it'll alter your perception to put more of your attention on the story and on the concept of healing. And so that makes the healing more powerful. Now, you can also use the dream awake method. I don't know that I'll explain that too much now. I didn't really do that with this because that felt way too powerful when I was doing it. I'll talk more about that story in the next video. But I mentioned the dream awake method for centering intentions, about using that to enter a state of full attention, which is just doing a level 1 charge and then using the sleep awake method on top of that level 1 charge to enter an even deeper transcendental state. I felt like that was going to be, when I was doing this, it felt like that was going to be way too powerful. So I didn't do that. Like I said, I'll talk about that more in the next video. So I just did like a regular state of full attention of just making an effort to try to put all of my attention on the story and making it more interesting and just being more patient. So So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So that's the main charging technique. Now, one other thing I want to mention is this next point, which says alternate and mix the story so that spiritual energy charges with the healing energy. So that's important because now I didn't mention this last last chapter, because I could never charge psychic energy and spiritual energy at the same time. It was always like, basically when that happens, that means something you're doing is sinful, right? So you can't, it's very difficult, virtually impossible, to charge an intention and an action that is sinful, right, and spiritual energy at the same time. That's basically the definition of what a sin is. Something you can't charge easily with spiritual energy, or negative pleasures and things like that. And so psychic energy always, at least using sensory type psychic abilities, in my experience, it always followed that sort of paradigm. I can never do both. Every time I charge psychic energy to use sensory psychic abilities, I always felt like I was getting more depressed, more empty. There was a large void. I didn't feel happy, because I could barely feel any emotion at all, because my spiritual energy kept dropping, right? Now, like I was saying before, it's different when I tried to heal my body. I didn't notice that. I actually could feel emotion, right? And I could feel the healing emotion associated with this intention. I felt it more and more and more, and that was good. That was nice. That was fun, right? I could actually feel positive emotions. Specifically, I felt the healing emotion the most, but I could feel positive emotions in general while performing this kind of charge. And I felt my pineal gland being activated, right? So that when your pineal gland activates, that's a telltale sign you're using some type of psychic ability. So I felt it activating. It didn't hurt as much, right? I'm not sure that it really hurt at all, right? It generally only hurts when I use the sensory type psychic abilities, even though my sensory abilities still activate to a degree when I'm using this. For whatever reason, when I held the intention to heal, it just didn't really hurt. I don't remember it really hurting that much, even though I could still sense my body using ESP. But I could also actually feel emotion, and I could actually, because I could feel emotion or positive emotions, I could actually charge spiritual energy. So that's why I didn't mention this last chapter. But with this, yes. Excuse me. So with this, yes, you can actually charge healing energy and spiritual energy at the same time. So you obviously want to do that in general. And the reason why it's so important, not only because it's always a good thing to connect yourself to God and Jesus Christ, but the reason it's important here is for what we were talking about, I think it was last video, that when you start manifesting your chi, you never know what the outcome is really going to be. Because your chi, when you're using it in that way, your spirit taps into some kind of universal intelligence that commands the chi, or the chi is behaving according to carry out the command that you asked for. The conscious mind could express the commands, but it doesn't really need to know how the chi is going to do that. It can put some of that in the command to sort of confine how it expresses itself or carries out your commands, but the chi is always going to go into some intelligence far beyond what we were able to know on a conscious level, so you never really know when it's going to manifest. There's always a risk. And I believe that when you connect your spirit to God, right, you reduce the risk, right, of anything unwanted happening. So it's like a form of protection. So the more connected to God you are while doing this, in theory, the less of a less chance there is going to be a negative outcome. So you want to mix the two. So when I'm doing it, when I've done this, like I said, I've only really done this one time, right? But when I was doing it, I would tell a highly affirmational story about healing. Then I would switch to focusing on Jesus, and I would just tell some story for charging spiritual energy, right? So I would say how much Jesus loves me, and that I'm one with Jesus, and Jesus is amazing, right? So I would imagine being in heaven and speaking to the angels. I just make stuff up that gets me really in that spiritual mood. And that type of scenery and those types of ideas, they help me to connect to Jesus Christ. So they help me connect to God. And so I would have those types of scenes, and then now I feel my spiritual energy charging, right? And then I would switch back to charging healing energy. Right, so now I'm charging healing energy, and I would switch back to focusing on Jesus. And so what I'm actually doing is charging healing energy and spiritual energy at the same time, which feels really amazing, right? And then sometimes I would put them both in one, right? So I would just say that, so I'm focused on different subjects. So I would focus on my body, I would focus on healing, and I would say that Jesus gives me the power to heal. So now I'm doing the affirmational part, right? So I'm saying I have the power to heal my body through Jesus Christ, and he has blessed me with his blessing. Now, I would, something like that, not by my own power, by the power of Jesus, I have the ability to heal, and I'm healing my body. I would just, I could just say things like that in the affirmational story, because I really want to mix this feeling of healing with spiritual energy. And it kind of grounds it in a way. Like I said, it kind of grounds it in the sense of, it attaches your spirit or your subconscious state to the state closer to God for protection, right? So you don't have negative outcomes and manifestations. In the occult, they'll do something similar with demons, right? And so they focus on some spirit they're channeling, and they would lean into that influence of that spirit in what the suggestions is planting into the subconscious. They would transcendentally connect to the spirit, eventually become psychically possessed, and they would lean into that spirit's suggestions for their manifestation. And we'll talk a little more about it, I think, toward the end of the chapter. And that gives them sort of these supernatural powers that come from demons. And even though it might look good on it, sometimes it could look like it's something positive on the outside, it's still evil, it's still negative. They can eventually start using your chi this is basically stage 2 possession. They can start influencing your chi against your will, right? And start manifesting all types of bad things in your body to damage you. And I believe you actually see some people, that happens to some people, right? I remember I was reading this story. This was a while ago, though. This woman who had contacted spirit guides, and that's usually how it starts, right? They were contacting spirit guides, and they pretended to be evolved or some nonsense. And eventually she turned away from them. She found Jesus, and she turned away from them. But they did something to her. They left her face she had partial face paralysis. So this is something they do, right? And she couldn't move. And it was kept in this weird, demonic kind of smile looking state, because it was their way of mocking her or something like that. And they can do that with your chi, right? They can manifest the chi in your body to do things like that. They can damage your DNA. Like I said before, I suspect that they can pop a blood vessel or something. I think they can do that, or give you an aneurysm. So when their connection to you is strong enough, and they have access to your chi or your etheric body, I think they use that too. They can mess with that and how it's influencing your vitality if you let them, right? If you let them in, if you consent to it, and you charge that form of consent, you get stage 2 possession, right? And so they will usually they'll start off by, like we talked about, the long con, right? And then they'll, when you let them in, they'll give you powers to heal and do stuff like that. But eventually they'll turn on you and then start trying to kill you, right? And so they can do stuff like that. So you have to be very, very careful when you want to focus on God. You want to focus on Jesus, right? And you want to obviously get permission from permission from them to do any of this stuff, right? And so you have to have a strong relationship, a strong communication with God, things like that. And so for this last point, as you begin to deep charge, your mood will cause you to feel an urge to release a burst of healing action. So I just put that in parentheses. So basically, I've never really, like I said, I haven't really deep charged this. I did it one time that you could really say is deep charging. But when you keep doing this, right, eventually you're going to obviously deep charge, right? So deep charging is just performing having continuous charging sessions over a rolling 7-day period, and not really focusing on things when you're not charging that would be antithetical to your charge session, right? So if you're charging something positive like healing, the more you focus on negative things through that rolling 7-day period, whether it be being around negative people or watching negative things like scary movies or the news, right? The negativity of the news, depending on how much it sticks with you when you watch it, right? All those negative thoughts will charge some type of negative emotion, which sticks around in your short-term memory for 7 days, and it'll dampen the positive intention, which in this case is healing, right? So you want to be careful with that when you're deep charging, but ultimately you would want to just have charging sessions multiple charging sessions over the course of a 7-day period, a rolling 7-day period. So some of them are going to be pre-charge sessions. You can deep charge or pre-charge, and some of them are going to be main charging. When you're main charging, if you feel like you're going too long and you're building up too much negative memory, you could just go back to pre-charging and keep building it. So that's how you would deep charge it. Now, when you're deep charging, and this is what happened to me, when I'm doing it, because I'm charging in such short intervals, that's not really enough time to engage in a lot of the manifestation action, or in this case would be the healing action. You could basically call it that. So that would basically be the moment, the action with which my subconscious instinct is expressing or manifesting my chi to heal, right? So that would be the healing action. That's not enough time to really engage in much of a healing action, right? It's kind of too short. So it just keeps building, right, in your short-term memory. So even though it's building in the sense of the normal sense we talked about building with, which is just making your subconscious memory more positive, I suspect I'm also actually building chi energy, right? So which is something different, right? But I'm actually building chi energy in my etheric body. Normally it's considered to be the Dantian. So in my experiences, I think that's true. I think it actually builds up in your stomach area. Dantian is just a term in, I think Tai Chi or Qi Kung. That's considered to be like the battery for your chi. There's different levels to the Dantian, but I just call it Dantian to keep it simple. In my experience, I think that's true. But when you're deep charging this energy, the healing it, when you're deep charging the intention to heal, and you're not going for too long, you're going to feel your chi building up and your subconscious memory building up. In this case, they're pretty much synonymous, so I'll just say your chi. You're going to feel it building up, or the charge building up more and more and more. And what it's going to do is it's going to affect your mood. You're going to be in the mood like you have this mood to release energy. That's kind of what it feels like, right? You just want to release the energy. And you feel compelled to focus on the target. In this case, it's the body. You feel compelled to focus on your body and just express the healing action, right? Your subconscious is super in the mood to do that, right? Now, if you do that, if you give into that urge and say, yeah, I just want to heal, it's going to kind of feel good, right? So you're going to, if you give into it, you focus on your body and you just start healing, you're going to notice you're in a transcendental state. You're going in and out of a transcendental state like crazy, and your subconscious is constantly expressing the healing action. So it's just doing it. But if you do that too long, you're going to notice that now your subconscious is not getting as volatile. It's like it's building up negative memory. In this case, I believe it's also the fact that you're using up your chi that you built up. And then your subconscious is kind of going to go back to a kind of almost like a ground state level where it's not really doing much. It doesn't react much to the intention to heal. You don't feel this urge to engage in this healing action, things like that. So you used up your charge, right? So in other words, when you deep charge, it's going to feel like you have a lot of potential energy you want to release, and you kind of have to hold off on that to build the charge up more. However, right, you do want to, when you have a lot of it, you can go for a little longer, and that's what I did. I never went too long, so this is all highly theoretical. I don't really practice much with deep charging, but I have, when I built up like a lot, I was like, okay, I can go longer. So I started going longer and really allowing myself to engage with that healing action at the level of instinct. And I just was feeling it. It felt pretty good, right? It felt good. Like I said, this type of psychic energy use didn't feel like bad. I didn't feel super depressed and evil and, you know what I mean? Like I was moving away from God, and it actually felt good that healing action of healing my body actually felt pretty good. Now, there was an element of it that felt, I did have kind of like freaky, so I call them like freaky phenomena. So I'll talk about that in the next video. I'm going to describe what actually happened when I did this and what I was feeling. Because it felt like I could feel my spirit body, almost like you might say my astral body, but I could feel my spirit sort of activating and awakening. So we talked about awakening, right? There's a lot of freaky symptoms, but I'll talk about it in the next video. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So like I said, it's mostly a formality. We primarily talked about this when it came to sensory type psychic abilities in the last video, last chapter. There are some other things that we did talk about with this video for psychic energy, for controlling your chi. But most of it's the same. Now this, like I said before, this is just for healing, right? So it may be different if you're doing something else with a manifestation intention, especially if you're trying to manifest something external to your body. Probably that's illegal and you might not be able to charge it with spiritual energy, so I'm not sure. But this is just kind of where my mind is, where my theory is right now with this. But again, as always, you want to get permission from God before doing any of this stuff, right? So yeah, that's it for now. In the next video, I'll talk about my experience the one time I deep charged this, which was with healing. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next video.